The stars looked cold and distant through the viewing port of the Seeker's Dawn. Captain Zaradek stood with her forearms crossed, watching the empty space between two dead planets. Her crystalline skin caught the light from the ship's panels, making her look like a living diamond. She had been searching this sector for 3 weeks now, looking for anything that might be worth studying. "Captain, we have something on the long-range sensors," called out Chief Science Officer Kliktar from his station. The insect-like alien's compound eyes gleamed as he studied his readings. His 6 legs moved quickly across the control panel, making clicking sounds that echoed through the bridge. Zara turned away from the viewing port. "Why?" and walked over to the science station. "What kind of something, Kliktar?" "It appears to be a vessel of some kind. Very old by the look of it. The metal composition is primitive, mostly iron and steel alloys. It's drifting without power about 2 million kilometers from our current position." Engineer Wismith floated over to join them. The gaseous being's voice came from a translation device strapped to his vapor-like form. "Should we investigate, Captain? It might be worth something to the Archaeological Society." Zara considered this. The Galactic Archaeological Survey paid. Well, for interesting finds, especially from unknown civilizations, they had been having a slow month, and the crew could use the bonus credits. "Bring us closer. Let's take a look at this mystery ship." The Seeker's Dawn changed course, its bio-grown hull shifting smoothly through space. As they approached the unknown vessel, more details became clear on the main screen. The ship was massive, much larger than their own research vessel. It looked like a giant metal brick floating in the void. "By the void," whispered Dr. Valenex, the ship's xenorchaeologist. He was a tall, thin being with purple skin and large eyes. "Look at that construction. So crude, so primitive. Those are actual weld marks on the hull. Can you imagine? They actually melted metal to stick pieces together?" The other crew members gathered around the main display, all staring at the strange vessel. It was covered in small dents and scratches, probably from space debris hitting it over many years. Parts of the hull were darker than others, showing signs of extreme age and exposure to cosmic radiation. "The design is completely unknown," said Kliktar, his claws clicking rapidly as he ran scans. "It's not in any of our databases. The proportions are all wrong for any known species. Look at those openings in the hull. They're too small for Altarians, too big for Vexani, and the wrong shape for Etherians. How old do you think it is?" asked Zara, studying the image with professional interest. Dr. Valenex ran his scanner over the readings. "Based on the metal degradation and cosmic ray exposure, I would estimate at least 10,000 years, possibly more. This ship has been drifting for a very long time." Wispiskasei's form shimmered with excitement. "Think of the historical value. Completely unknown civilization, probably extinct for millennia. The research possibilities are endless, and the profit potential," added Navigator Quexil from her station. The small, green-skinned alien rarely spoke, but when it came to money, she always had something to say. Zara nodded. "Kliktar, run a full sensor sweep. Want to know everything about that ship, Valenex? Start preparing a boarding party. We're going to take a closer look." As the Seeker's Dawn moved closer to the ancient vessel, more details became visible. The ship was roughly rectangular, with what looked like weapon mounts along its sides. But the weapons were gone now, leaving only empty brackets and torn metal, where they once stood. Captain called out Kliktar, "I'm detecting some interesting energy signatures from the ship's core. It's very faint, but there might still be some power left in their systems." "After 10,000 years? Valenex sounded skeptical. "Impossible. No civilization we know of ever built power systems that could last that long." "The readings don't lie," Kliktar replied. "There's definitely something still active in there, even if it's barely functioning." Zara studied the ship more carefully. Despite its age and primitive appearance, there was something about it that made her feel uneasy. The design was too purposeful, too military-looking to be from a truly primitive civilization. The materials and construction methods were clearly ancient. "Bring us alongside," she ordered. "We'll dock with their airlock and see what we can find inside." The Seeker's Dawn extended its flexible docking tube toward the old ship. The connection was surprisingly easy to make, as if the ancient vessel's docking ports were designed to universal standards. This was odd, since no known civilization had used such designs 10,000 years ago. Atmosphere readings from the ship are showing breathable air, reported Dr. Sylvan, the ship's medical officer. It's mostly nitrogen and oxygen, which is unusual but not dangerous to most of our species. Nitrogen and oxygen, repeated Valenix thoughtfully. That's a very specific atmospheric composition. Most civilizations use nitrogen and carbon dioxide, or pure oxygen systems. Another mystery to solve, said Zara. Clicktar, Valenix, Wispmith, you're with me. The rest of you monitor from here. If anything goes wrong, undock immediately and call for backup. The boarding party gathered their equipment and headed for the airlock. As they stepped through the docking tube and into the ancient ship, they were struck by how different everything felt. The corridors were straight and narrow, with metal walls that showed no signs of the organic curves that modern ships used. The ceiling height is exactly 2.1 meters, observed Clicktar. That's very specific. It suggests the builders were roughly 1.8 meters tall, give or take. Bipedal from the look of these corridors, added Valenix. And they had appendages that could manipulate objects with fine precision. Look at these control panels. They had come to a junction in the corridor where several panels were mounted on the walls. The controls were clearly designed for beings with 5-digit hands, with buttons and switches that required precise finger movements to operate. How primitive, laughed Wismith. They actually used physical buttons and switches. No neural interfaces, no thought-controlled systems. It had to physically push things to make them work. The metalwork is impressive, though, admitted Clicktar.
Oh.
These joins are very strong, and the craftsmanship is quite good for such primitive methods. They continued deeper into the ship, their lights cutting through the darkness. The corridors all seemed to lead toward the center of the vessel, where they found what was clearly the command center. The room was filled with stations and displays, all dark and silent. This must be their control room, said Zara, looking around at the numerous stations. Each one seems designed for a specific function. Navigation, weapons, communications, engineering. Very compartmentalized. Valenix was examining one of the displays with his scanner. These screens are actually quite advanced for their time. High resolution, efficient power consumption. They may have been primitive in their construction methods, but they understood electronics fairly well. Should we try to power up some of these systems? Asked Wismith. If there's still power in the ship, we might be able to access their computer databases. Absolutely not, said Valenix firmly. We need to study this ship in its current state first. Any changes we make could destroy valuable archaeological evidence. As they explored the command center, they found more evidence of the ship's age. In the civilization that built it, there were signs of hasty repairs, jury-rigged systems, and modifications that suggested the vessel had seen hard use before being abandoned. Look at this, called Clicktar from across the room. He was examining a large display screen that was different from the others. This appears to be some kind of star chart or navigation display. Star positions are all wrong for current stellar positions. But if we account for stellar drift over 10,000 years, what is it? Asked Zara, moving to look over his shoulder. If my calculations are correct, this ship came from a system that's completely unknown to us. It's not in any of our star charts, not even the ancient ones. Wherever these beings came from, it's nowhere near the core worlds. Fascinating, murmured Valenix. A completely unknown civilization from an unknown system. This find could rewrite our understanding of galactic history. They spent several more hours exploring the ship, documenting everything they found. The vessel was larger than they had first thought, with multiple levels and compartments. Some areas seemed to be living quarters, others were clearly for storage or machinery. This ship could have carried hundreds of crew members, observed Zara, as they made their way back to the docking port. It's much larger than most exploration vessels. Military, said Clicktar with certainty. This was definitely a military vessel. The layout, the reinforced corridors, the weapon mounts we saw on the outside, this was a warship. A warship from 10,000 years ago, added Valenix. Imagine what we could learn about ancient warfare and military technology. As they returned to the Seeker's Dawn, Zara was already making plans. We'll tow it back to Research Station Omega 7. The facilities there are equipped to handle a find of this magnitude. The Archaeological Society will pay handsomely for this, said Wismuth. With satisfaction. Research Station Omega 7 was one of the largest facilities in the Outer Rim. Its massive hangar bays could hold dozens of ships, and its laboratories were equipped with the most advanced scientific equipment in the galaxy. Captain Zarevex watched from the observation deck as the ancient vessel was slowly moved into Hangar Bay 12. The ship looked even more impressive inside the station. Its dark metal hull stretched nearly 200 meters from end to end, and it was almost 50 meters wide. Compared to the sleek, curved ships of modern civilization, it looked like a giant metal block. But there was something intimidating about its size and bulk. Incredible, breathed Dr. Celthia, the station's chief energy specialist. She was an Etherian, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell. Her light flickered with excitement as she studied the readings from her scanners. The power signatures I'm detecting are unlike anything I've ever seen. Dr. Valenex nodded in agreement, though his expression remained condescending. Primitive, but interesting in its own way. These ancient beings managed to create something functional, even if it's crude by our standards. Station Commander Helix, a massive being with rock-like skin, lumbered over to join them. How long do you estimate the study will take? We have other research projects that need hangar space. Give us a week, said Valenex confidently. How complicated can the technology of a dead civilization be? Over the next 2 days, teams of scientists from across the galaxy arrived at the station. Word had spread quickly about the discovery of a completely unknown ancient civilization. Researchers, archaeologists, and technology specialists all wanted to be part of what was being called the find of the century. Junior researcher Quipilon was among the most excited. The young being had just graduated from the Galactic University, and this was his first major assignment. He was small, even for his species, with bright blue skin and large, curious eyes. His job was to catalog and document everything they found. Inside the ship, the interior design is so strange, he reported to the research team during their morning briefing. Everything is built for beings exactly 1.8 meters tall. The doorways, the ceiling heights, even the furniture we found. Like they were all exactly the same size. Genetic standardization, suggested Dr. Mintar, a biologist from the inner worlds. Many primitive civilizations went through phases where they tried to create perfect physical specimens. Materials are fascinating too, added Dr. Celthia. These metals shouldn't be able to hold together after so many years in space, but somehow they're still structurally sound. The alloy composition is incredibly simple, yet remarkably effective. The research teams had set up workstations throughout the ship, carefully documenting every system they found. The vessel was divided into distinct sections, command areas, living quarters, storage compartments, and what appeared to be weapon systems. The weapons mounts are particularly interesting, reported Commander Grixel, the station's military advisor. They're designed for projectile weapons rather than energy systems. It's very primitive, but the mounting systems are incredibly robust. Valenex laughed. Projectile weapons. Can you imagine? They actually threw pieces of metal at their enemies. How wonderfully barbaric. On the third day, Quipilon was working alone in what appeared to be the ship's communication center. The room was filled with panels covered in switches, buttons, and small screens. Everything was labeled with symbols in the unknown language that the universal translators were still working to decode. Curious about a particular panel that seemed different from the others, Quipilon carefully activated his portable power unit and connected it to what looked like a simple communication array. He wanted to see if he could get any of the displays to show information. The moment power flowed into the system, things began happening throughout the ship. Lights started flickering on in corridors that had been dark for millennia. Displays began showing information in the strange symbols. And deep in the ship's core, much larger systems began drawing power from some unknown source. What did you do? shouted Dr. Celthea from 3 decks away. Her energy readings were going crazy as power flowed through conduits that had been dead for thousands of years. I just connected a small power unit to one panel, Quipolon called back through his communicator. I didn't think it would do anything major, but it had done something major. Throughout the ship, automated systems were coming online. Environmental controls activated, filling the corridors with breathable atmosphere. Emergency lighting cast. Eerie shadows on the metal walls. Somewhere deep in the ship, they could hear the sound of machinery starting up. Everyone out of the ship immediately ordered Commander Hillix over the station-wide communication system. Unknown systems are activating. This could be dangerous. The research teams quickly gathered their equipment and evacuated to the hangar bay floor. From there, they watched as more and more lights came on inside the ancient vessel. Through the viewing ports, they could see displays flickering to life and systems activating throughout the ship. "The power draw is incredible," reported Dr. Celthea, monitoring the situation from her mobile scanner. "Whatever's happening in there is using massive amounts of energy. But where is it coming from? A small power unit couldn't possibly provide this much electricity." "The ship must have its own power source," suggested Dr. Valenix. "Some kind of primitive nuclear reactor, perhaps. I can't imagine how it could still be functional after so long." As they watched, text began appearing on external displays. Mounted on the ship's hull, the symbols scrolled across the screens in neat, orderly lines. The universal translators worked frantically to decode the meaning. "I'm getting partial translations," announced Dr. Lingo, the station's linguistics expert. "Something about emergency protocols and automated systems. The language structure is surprisingly complex for such an ancient civilization." More text appeared, and gradually the translators began making sense of it. The first complete sentence that came through made everyone in the hangar bay go quiet. "USS Liberty Captain Jake Morrison commanding. Emergency protocols activated. Crew in stasis, awaiting extraction orders." The silence stretched for long seconds as the implications sank in. "Crew in stasis," repeated Commander Hillix slowly. "That means ... There are living beings on that ship," finished Dr. Celthea, her energy form flickering with shock. "Impossible," said Dr. Valenix firmly. "No stasis technology could keep anyone alive for 10,000 years. It's clearly a malfunction, an automated message from a dead computer system." But more messages were appearing on the displays. System status reports, power levels, atmospheric readings. Everything indicated that the ship was very much alive and that its systems were preparing for something. "The power readings are continuing to increase," reported Dr. Celthea with growing concern. "Whatever's happening in there, it's building up to something big." Deep inside the ship, in a section that the research teams hadn't yet explored, rows of cylindrical chambers began humming with activity. The lights came on around each chamber, and displays showed vital signs and biological readings. The stasis pods that had kept their occupants in suspended animation for over 3 centuries were beginning their revival sequences. In the first pod, a man with short brown hair and weathered features began to stir. His vital signs strengthened. As the life support systems gently brought him back to consciousness, Captain Jake Morrison was waking up. In the pods around him, his crew was also beginning to wake. Commander Lisa Parker, his second-in-command, was in the pod to his right. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Walsh, his chief engineer, was stirring in another pod nearby. One by one, the crew of the USS Liberty was coming back to life. Sir," called out Quipolon, staring at his scanner in disbelief. "I'm detecting life signs inside the ship. It's multiple life signs, and they're getting stronger." The research team stared at the ancient vessel with new understanding. This wasn't a dead relic from a vanished civilization. This was a living ship, with a living crew, and they had just woken them up. "How is this possible?" whispered Dr. Mintar. "The energy requirements for keeping biological entities alive for so long should be enormous. Unless their stasis technology is far more advanced than we thought," said Dr. Celthea grimly. "Which would mean this civilization wasn't as primitive as we assumed." Inside the ship, Captain Morrison's eyes opened for the first time in over 300 years. The stasis chamber's medical systems ran their final checks and began the pod opening sequence. As the lid lifted, he took his first breath of recycled air and tried to remember where he was and what had happened. The last thing he remembered was the attack on the convoy near the Kepler system. His ship had taken heavy damage while protecting the civilian vessels. They had managed to fight off the attackers, but the Liberty's life support systems were failing. The only choice had been emergency stasis and hope that the automated distress beacon would bring help. Liberty Actual 2. All stations, he said, his voice hoarse from the long sleep. Status report. Around him, his crew was also waking up. Commander Parker sat up in her pod, immediately alert despite the long stasis. Lieutenant Commander Walsh was already checking his engineering displays, assessing the ship's condition. The meeting room on Research Station Omega-7 had never hosted anything like this before. On one side of the long table sat the human crew of the Liberty, still adjusting to being awake after 3 centuries of sleep. On the other side sat representatives from a dozen alien species, all trying to process what they had discovered. Captain Jake Morrison sat at the head of the table, flanked by Commander Lisa Parker and Lieutenant Commander Ryan Walsh. Dr. Amy Rodriguez, the ship's medical officer, was running final health checks on the crew members who were still waking up. Major Kevin Brooks, the Marine commander, stood near the door, his eyes constantly scanning the room. "Let me understand this correctly," Morrison said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of tension. "You're telling me that Earth's location is unknown to your galactic databases? That means either Earth was destroyed or it's so far away that your civilization has never encountered it." Dr. Valenix nodded, though he still seemed to be struggling with the concept that these humans were real and not ancient artifacts. "The galaxy is vast, Captain Morrison. There are millions of star systems that remain unexplored. Your Earth could be in any of them. Or it could be gone," added Dr. Mintar quietly. 300 years is a long time. Civilizations rise and fall, planets change, sometimes they die. Morrison's jaw tightened slightly, but he kept his composure. "What about other human ships? We weren't the only ones out here. Earth's had dozens of exploration and colonization vessels in deep space." "We have no records of any other human vessels," replied Captain Zarathex. "Your ship is the first we've encountered. If there are others, they haven't made contact with galactic civilization." Commander Parker leaned forward. "Tell us about this galactic civilization. How many species are involved? What kind of government structure do you have?" "There are over 200 member species in the Galactic Council," explained Commander Helix. "We've maintained peace for over 2,000 years through cooperation and mutual benefit. Conflicts are rare, usually resolved through economic negotiations or territorial agreements." 2,000 years of peace," repeated Major Brooks from his position by the door. "That's impressive. How do you maintain order across so many species?" "Through understanding and compromise," said Dr. Celthia, her energy form flickering with what might have been pride. "We've evolved beyond the need for violence. Most species gave up warfare centuries ago." The humans exchanged glances. Commander Walsh spoke up. "What do you mean by gave up warfare? How do you defend yourselves if someone attacks?" "Attacks are extremely rare," said Captain Nex. "Most conflicts are resolved through the Council's mediation processes. When force is necessary, we use non-lethal energy weapons designed to disable rather than destroy." "Non-lethal weapons?" Morrison repeated slowly. "What about your military forces? Fleet sizes? Defensive capabilities?" "We maintain peacekeeping forces," replied Commander Helix. "Small fleets of lightly armed vessels for patrol duties and emergency response. But large-scale military operations haven't been necessary for centuries." Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her medical scanner. "Sorry to interrupt, but I need to report something concerning. The medical scans these people performed on us while we were unconscious show some interesting readings." "What kind of readings?" asked Morrison. "According to their data, human bone density is approximately 40% higher than the average. For galactic species, our muscle mass is significantly greater, our reflexes are faster, and our pain tolerance is off the charts by their standards." Dr. Mintar shifted uncomfortably. "We assumed these were evolutionary adaptations to a high-gravity world. Many species from heavy planets show similar characteristics. Earth is a heavy planet, confirmed Walsh. 1.2 times standard galactic gravity, according to your measurements. But it's also a dangerous planet. We evolved in an environment where survival meant being tough. Dangerous how? Asked Dr. Valenix with scientific curiosity. Editors, natural disasters, climate extremes, disease, resource scarcity, listed Commander Parker. For most of human history, we were either fighting the environment, fighting each other, or fighting for survival, fighting each other. Captain Nex's crystalline features showed confusion. Why would members of the same species fight? Resources, territory, ideology, religion, politics, Morrison said simply. Humans have been at war with each other for most of our history. It's only in the last few centuries that we achieved any kind of global peace, and even that was temporary. The aliens around the table looked disturbed by this information. The concept of intra-species warfare seemed foreign to them. But that's barbaric, said Dr. Valenix. Surely advanced civilizations move beyond such primitive behavior? Major Brooks spoke from his position by the door. Advanced civilizations that never had to fight for survival might move beyond it. But when your whole history is shaped by conflict, you learn to be very good at it. What he means, Morrison said, noting the uncomfortable expressions around the table, is that human technology and tactics were developed under constant pressure. Every innovation had to work in real combat conditions, or the people using it died. Lieutenant Commander Walsh nodded. Our ship designs, our weapons, our defensive systems, they're all built for warfare. Not peacekeeping, not patrol duties, but actual combat against enemies trying to kill you. The Liberty is a warship, Morrison continued. It was designed to fight, to take damage, and to keep fighting. Every human vessel in the exploration fleet was built to the same standards. Dr. Celthia's energy form flickered nervously. When you say warship, what exactly do you mean? What kind of weapons does your ship carry? Standard Loadout replied. Walsh, railguns, particle beam arrays, nuclear missiles, defensive countermeasures, and electronic warfare systems. Oh, nuclear weapons. Dr. Mintar's voice was barely a whisper. You use nuclear weapons in space combat? When necessary, Morrison said matter-of-factly. They're effective against hardened targets and large formations. But the radiation, the environmental damage, protested Dr. Valenix. Space is already full of radiation, pointed out Dr. Rodriguez, and there's no environment to damage in vacuum. Nuclear weapons are clean and efficient for space warfare. Commander Parker noticed how quiet the aliens had become. Is there a problem with nuclear technology? Do your species not use it? Most civilizations abandoned nuclear weapons centuries ago, said Captain Nex carefully. They're considered too dangerous, too destructive for civilized warfare. Civilized warfare, repeated Major Brooks. That's an interesting concept. How? Do you fight a civilized war? As I mentioned, most conflicts are resolved without violence, explained Commander Helix. When force is necessary, we use energy weapons set to stun or disable. The goal is to stop the conflict, not to destroy the enemy. And if the enemy doesn't want to be stopped, asked Morrison. Well, they usually do. Once their ships are disabled, they're willing to negotiate. The humans exchanged another series of glances. Ausch cleared his throat. What if their ships are too heavily armored to be disabled by your stun weapons? That's not really a problem, said Dr. Celthia. Most galactic species build their ships for speed and efficiency, not for heavy armor. Thick armor is considered wasteful and unnecessary. Unnecessary, Morrison repeated. Right, Commander Parker. What are your thoughts on this? Parker had been listening carefully to everything said. Sir, I think we may have a significant tactical advantage if we ever encounter hostile forces. Our ships are built to survive in combat environments that these people have never experienced. Hostile forces? Captain Nex sounded confused. What kind of hostile forces? The kind that attacked our convoy, Morrison said grimly. Unknown ships with advanced weapons and no interest in negotiation. They hit us hard and fast, trying to destroy everyone in the convoy. But who would do such a thing? Asked Dr. Valenix. We don't know, admitted Walsh. They weren't human, and they definitely weren't interested in talking. They just started shooting. Pirates, perhaps? Suggested Commander Helix. We do have some criminal organizations in the Outer Rim. These weren't pirates, Major Brooks said firmly. Pirates want to steal cargo, not destroy everything. These ships were built for war, and they knew how to use them. Dr. Rodriguez finished her medical checks and joined the conversation. There's something else we need to discuss. The medical scans show that humans have a much higher resistance to physical and psychological stress than most galactic species. We recover from injuries faster. We can function under extreme conditions. We don't break down under pressure the way other species apparently do. That's probably why we survived the attack, added Parker. We were able to keep fighting, even after taking severe damage. Your ship took severe damage? Asked Dr. Celthia with alarm. Hull breaches, power failures, weapon systems offline, listed Walsh. We kept fighting until we drove them off. And then you entered stasis rather than surrender, noted Dr. Valenix. Surrender wasn't an option, Morrison said simply. We had civilians to protect. The room fell silent again. Finally, Captain Nex spoke up. Captain Morrison, I need to ask you something directly. Are humans a violent species? Back in Hangar Bay 12, the USS Liberty sat like a sleeping giant among the sleek research vessels. The alien scientists had set up their monitoring equipment at what they considered a safe distance, though none of them really understood what they were about to witness. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Walsh stood at his engineering station aboard the Liberty, running through system diagnostics with the methodical precision of a career military engineer. The readings on his screens made him smile grimly. After 300 years in stasis, the ship was in remarkably good condition. Captain, he called out to Morrison, who was reviewing tactical displays with Commander Parker. I've completed the full system check. All primary systems are operational. Main reactor is at 92% efficiency, which is actually better than when we went into stasis. Weapon systems, asked Major Brooks from his position at the security station. All 6 railgun batteries operational. Optical beam arrays are charged and ready. Nuclear missile complement is full, and all guidance systems check out perfectly. Morrison nodded with satisfaction. Defensive systems, armor plating is intact, though we still have some damage from the last engagement. Shield generators are online and functioning at full capacity. Point defense systems are operational. Dr. Amy Rodriguez looked up from her medical station. The crew revival process is complete. All 147 crew members are awake and accounted for. Medical status is green across the board. Outside the ship, Dr. Celthia was monitoring energy readings with growing concern. The power levels coming from that vessel are incredible, she reported to the assembled scientists. Their reactor is producing more energy than our entire station uses in a week. It's just a power plant, Dr. Velenek said dismissively. Primitive fusion technology, probably very inefficient. They need all that power because their systems are so crude. Captain Zaradhex wasn't so sure. She had been studying the humans during their meeting, and something about their calm confidence disturbed her. They spoke about warfare and weapons. As casually as her people discussed weather patterns, Captain Morrison, she called out over the communication system. Are you ready to begin the demonstration? Morrison's voice came back steady and professional. Ready when you are, Captain Nex? We'll start with basic systems and work our way up. Understood. Please proceed. Morrison turned to his crew. All right, people. Let's show our new friends what human engineering looks like. Walsh, bring the main engines online, aye, sir. Bringing fusion reactors to full power. The change was immediate and dramatic. The ship's hull began to vibrate with barely contained energy as the massive fusion reactors reached full output. External lights blazed to life along the Liberty's hull, turning the dark metal into a constellation of purpose and power in the observation area. Dr. Celthia's equipment went completely haywire. The energy output just increased by a factor of 20, she reported in shock. How is that possible? Their engines must be incredibly inefficient, suggested Dr. Minter. They're probably wasting most of that energy as heat. But the thermal sensors weren't showing excessive heat buildup. Somehow the human ship was channeling enormous amounts of energy without the waste that galactic technology would produce. Next, we'll test our maneuvering systems, Morrison announced. The Liberty's attitude thrusters fired in sequence, causing the massive ship to pivot smoothly despite its size. The movement was precise and controlled, showing that the vessel could maneuver like something much smaller. Impressive, admitted Commander Helix. For such a large ship, it moves very smoothly. We'll test our defensive systems, said Morrison. Bring the shields online. Energy barriers shimmered into existence around the Liberty's hull. But these weren't the elegant, nearly invisible shields that galactic ships used. These were crude, powerful fields that distorted the air around them and made the ship look like it was surrounded by heat waves. Dr. Celthea stared at her readings in disbelief. Those shield generators are producing energy levels that would overload our most powerful warships. The power requirements alone should be impossible for a ship that size. Primitive but effective, commented Dr. Velenex, though his voice was less certain than before. Inside the Liberty, Morrison was reviewing the weapons status with his tactical officer. All weapon systems show green, sir, reported Lieutenant Dan Cooper. Railguns are charged, particle beams are ready, and missile tubes are loaded. Captain Morrison, came Captain Nex's voice over the communication system. Could you demonstrate your weapons systems? Perhaps a low-power test? Morrison paused. Captain Nex, are you sure about that? Our weapons aren't really designed for low-power demonstrations. Just something simple, Nex replied. We're curious about your defensive capabilities. Looked at his crew. Parker shrugged. Walsh grinned. Brooks remained stone-faced but nodded slightly. Very well, Morrison said. We'll test one railgun at minimum power. I recommend you move your observation teams to maximum safe distance. How far would you suggest? Asked Commander Helix. At least 5 kilometers? Maybe 10 to be safe? 5 kilometers, Helix sounded incredulous. For a single weapon test? Trust me on this, Morrison said firmly. The observation teams reluctantly moved to what they considered an absurd distance. From their new position, the Liberty looked like a small model in the vast hangar bay. Lieutenant Cooper Morrison ordered. Select Railgun Battery 3. Single shot, minimum power, aimed at the far bulkhead of the hangar bay. Target the reinforced section that's designed for weapons testing, aye, sir. Railgun 3, minimum power, targeting the test section, fire when ready. What happened next? Changed everything. The railgun fired with a sound like thunder contained in a metal box. A projectile moving at a significant fraction of light. Speed crossed the hangar bay in a microsecond and struck the reinforced bulkhead that was designed. To absorb the impact of galactic weapons, the bulkhead exploded. Not damaged, not dented, not scorched. It simply ceased to exist in a shower of metal fragments and superheated plasma. The projectile punched through the reinforced wall, through the corridor behind it, through another wall, and finally came to rest somewhere deep in the station's structure. Emergency alarms began blaring throughout the station as automatic systems detected the hull breach. Emergency force fields activated to contain the atmosphere loss. Damage control teams scrambled to assess the extent of the destruction. In the observation area, the alien scientists stood in stunned silence. Dr. Celthea's energy form flickered wildly as she tried to process what she had just witnessed. That was minimum power, whispered Dr. Velenex. Minimum power, confirmed Morrison's voice over the communication system. Should we continue with the demonstration? No, said Captain Nex quickly. No, that's quite enough. But Morrison wasn't finished. Since we're testing systems, let me show you our scanning capabilities. Walsh ran a full tactical scan of the station. The Liberty's sensors swept across Research Station Omega-7 with methodical precision. Every defense system, every structural weakness, every critical system was mapped and analyzed in seconds. Interesting, commented Commander Parker as she reviewed the tactical data. Captain Nex, I have to ask, how exactly does this station defend itself? Defend itself? Vex sounded confused. It's a research station. It doesn't need to defend itself. No shields, no armor, no defensive weapons, Parker continued, reading from her displays. The hull plating is barely thick enough to keep atmosphere. And a stiff breeze could probably damage this place. We don't build stations for warfare, explained Commander Helix. There's no need. And your ships? Asked Major Brooks. We're detecting several vessels docked at this station. Similar construction. Minimal armor, weapons that read as little more than glorified flashlights. Those are standard galactic patrol vessels, said Captain Nex, with growing unease. They're perfectly adequate for peacekeeping duties. Inside the Liberty, Morrison was studying the tactical readouts with his senior staff. Analysis. People. What are we looking at? Sir, said Parker carefully, based on these scans. Our ship could probably destroy this entire station and every vessel docked here without taking significant damage. The station's power grid couldn't even overload our shields, added Walsh. Their most powerful weapons would barely scratch our armor. And that's just us, Brooks pointed out. One ship, 3 centuries old, probably obsolete by current human standards. Morrison nodded grimly. Dr. Rodriguez, those medical scans you mentioned earlier. How do human capabilities compare to these species? In every measurable category, humans are superior, Rodriguez reported. Stronger, faster, more durable, better reflexes, higher pain tolerance. It's not even close. So we have technological superiority and physical superiority, Morrison summarized. That's going to make for some interesting diplomatic discussions. Outside the ship, the alien scientists were having their own discussions, though theirs were driven by growing fear. Rather than tactical assessment, one ship, Dr. Celthia was saying, one ship could probably conquer half the galaxy. Don't be ridiculous, protested Dr. Valenix, but his voice lacked conviction. I'm serious, Celthia continued. Look at the power readings, the weapons capabilities, the defensive systems. The emergency meeting in Research Station Omega-7's main conference room was unlike anything the facility had ever hosted. Representatives from 12 different species sat around the oval table, their expressions ranging from worried to terrified. At the head of the table, Captain Jake Morrison sat with his senior officers, calm and professional despite the tension in the air. Station Commander Helix had called the meeting after the weapons, a demonstration that had punched a hole through 3 bulkheads and sent shockwaves through the galactic scientific community. Emergency repair crews were still working to fix the damage, and the story was already spreading to other research stations across the galaxy. Captain Morrison, began Commander Helix, his rock-like features showing unusual stress. We need to discuss what happened during your demonstration. The damage to our station was far beyond what we expected from any weapons system. Morrison nodded calmly. I did warn you to move to a safe distance, and that was our smallest weapon at minimum power. I thought it was important for you to understand what you were dealing with. What we're dealing with, repeated Dr. Celthia. Her energy form flickering nervously is a level of destructive capability that we haven't seen in this galaxy for over 2,000 years. Which brings up an important question, said Captain Zarathex. Captain Morrison, what are your intentions? What does humanity want? Morrison looked around the table at the assembled aliens. Now we want answers. We want to know what happened to Earth, what happened to our colonies, and whether there are any other human ships out there. Beyond that, we want to find a place in this galaxy where we can live in peace. In peace, echoed Dr. Valenix skeptically. But you're clearly a military force. That ship of yours could destroy entire fleets. Could and would are 2 different things, replied Commander Lisa Parker. We're soldiers, but we're not conquerors. We fight when we have to, but we'd rather not fight at all. And why build such powerful weapons? Asked Dr. Mintar. Because the galaxy isn't always a peaceful place, said Major Kevin Brooks from his position near the door. We learned that the hard way when we were attacked 300 years ago. About that attack, said Captain Nex. You mentioned unknown ships with advanced weapons. Can you tell us more about them? Lieutenant Commander Ryan Walsh pulled up a display showing tactical data from the Liberty's last battle. Multiple vessels, design unknown, weapons, technology, at least equal to ours. They attacked our convoy without warning or communication. No attempt at negotiation, no demands, just immediate hostile action. That's impossible, protested Commander Helix. There are no species in this galaxy with that kind of military capability. There are now, said Morrison quietly. The question is whether they were from this galaxy or somewhere else. Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward. During our battle, we managed to scan one of their ships before it was destroyed. The hull materials were unknown, and the energy signatures didn't match. Anything in our databases? Unknown materials and energy signatures, repeated Dr. Celthia. That suggests either a very advanced civilization or one from outside our local galactic region. Either way, said Walsh, they're out there somewhere, and they're hostile. Your peaceful galaxy might not stay peaceful much longer. The aliens exchanged worried glances. The concept of an external threat was something they hadn't considered in centuries. Captain Morrison, said Captain Nex carefully, if such a threat exists, what would you recommend? Morrison was quiet for a moment, considering his words. In my experience, the best way to maintain peace is to be prepared for war. Your civilization has been peaceful for so long that you've forgotten how to defend yourselves. Are you suggesting we should militarize? Asked Commander Helix with alarm. I'm suggesting you should be realistic about the galaxy you live in, Morrison replied. You've been lucky for 2,000 years. That luck might be running out. What role would humanity play in this? Asked Dr. Valinix. Morrison looked at his officers, then back at the aliens. That depends on what you're willing to offer us. We need a place to live, resources to repair and maintain our ships, and information about what happened to our people. In return, we can offer protection and military expertise. Protection from what? Asked Dr. Mintar. From whatever attacked us 300 years ago, said Brooks. From pirates, from hostile civilizations, from anyone who thinks you're peaceful. Worlds would be easy targets. But we don't need protection, protested Dr. Valinix. We have the Galactic Council. We have laws. We have agreements. Laws and agreements only work if everyone follows them, pointed out Parker. What happens when someone doesn't? The room fell silent as the aliens considered this.
Allie?
Captain Nex spoke. Captain Morrison, you said there might be other human ships in this sector. How many are we talking about? Morrison smiled slightly. Walsh, bring up the long-range communication array. Let's see who's out there. Back on the Liberty, the communication systems came online with a power that dwarfed anything the research station possessed. The signal reached across light years of space, broadcasting on frequencies that only human ships would monitor. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the USS Liberty, broadcasting on all human frequencies. Any human vessels receiving this transmission, please respond. The wait was agonizing. For several minutes there was nothing but static. Then, one by one, responses began coming in. Liberty, this is Captain Sarah Johnson of the USS Defender. We're 3 light years from your position and inbound. Liberty, this is Captain Mike Chen of the USS Ranger. We've been monitoring Galactic. Communications, ready to assist. Liberty, this is Captain Lisa Williams of the USS Guardian. We have a full Marine battalion aboard and are standing by. The responses kept coming. 17 ships in total, all within a week's travel of the research station, all carrying crews trained for exploration and warfare, all armed with weapons that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. In the conference room, aliens listened to the radio chatter with growing concern. 17 ships, whispered Dr. Celthia, each one as powerful as the Liberty. Small fleet, Morrison said matter-of-factly. Enough to provide security for human settlements and assist with galactic defense if needed. Or enough to conquer. Half the galaxy, muttered Dr. Valinix. Morrison's expression hardened slightly. Doctor, let me be very clear about something. If humanity wanted to conquer this galaxy, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about it. We'd already be doing it. Then what do you want? Asked Captain Nex. We want what every species wants, replied Morrison. Place to call home, the right to exist in peace, and the security to protect what's ours. And if we refuse to provide those things, asked Commander Hell_IX. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then we'll find them somewhere else. The galaxy is a big place. I'm sure there are unclaimed systems where we could establish colonies. Independent human colonies, said Parker, with no ties to galactic civilization, free to make their own rules and defend themselves as they see fit. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Humanity could either be part of galactic civilization or outside it. But either way, They would not be ignored or dismissed. "There is another option," said Dr. Rodriguez. "We could work together. Human military experience combined with galactic technology and resources, we could all benefit from such cooperation." "What are you proposing?" asked Dr. Celthia. "A partnership," Morrison said. "Humanity provides military expertise and protection. The galactic community provides technology, resources, and information. We share knowledge and work together to face whatever threats might emerge. As equals," added Parker firmly. "Not as subjects or specimens, but as equal partners in galactic civilization." Captain Nex considered this for several minutes. "I'll need to discuss this with the Galactic Council. A decision this important can't be made at the local level." "Of course," Morrison agreed. "But while you're discussing it, keep in mind that the universe doesn't wait for committee decisions. If there are hostile forces out there, they won't care about your deliberations." "How long can you wait for an answer?" asked Commander Helix Morrison. Looked at his watch. "My fleet will be assembled here within a week. We'll need an answer by then. If the council wants to negotiate, we're willing to talk. If not, we'll make our own way." "And if we try to stop you?" asked Dr. Vell. Knox. The room went very quiet. Morrison's voice was calm, but carried an edge of steel. "Doctor, I hope that's not something you're seriously considering." "No," said Captain Vex quickly. "No, we're not considering that." "Good," Morrison said, relaxing slightly. "Because we'd really prefer to be friends." As the meeting broke up, the aliens filed out with much to discuss. The humans remained in the conference room, planning their next moves. "Think they'll accept the partnership?" asked Parker. "They don't have much choice," replied Brooks. "Accept us as partners, or deal with us as independents. Either way, humanity is back in the galaxy." Morrison walked over to the viewing port and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there were the ships that had attacked his convoy. Somewhere out there might be other human colonies that had survived. And somewhere out there was Earth, whether it still existed or not. "Walsh," he said, "send a message to the fleet. Tell them to prepare for long-term operations.